Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of In-Depth Angling. Really excited to film this one with you today. We're going to be covering over the walleye and their movements during the summertime on Lake of the Ozarks. Let's get right into this. We're going to start over here up on the upper Osage arm of the Lake of the Ozarks, almost over here to Truman Lake. This is going to be more of a seasonal period of late spring to early fall that I'm going to cover here. The walleye kind of have different patterns based on season. Like every other fish does in the lake, so we're going to kind of cover that period here today, which is my favorite period to target these fish. We start off with some walleye in the post-spawn transition and on the move, so these fish are not like sitting in the same spot like they are during the spawn. They're up and they're moving back out. They will run up the creek arms and up the main river arms. This is probably the biggest migration that we have is up here, and they get stacked up by this area below Harry S. Truman Dam. And they can be caught off the bank here and by boat by trolling around here during the spawning season, and then they start funneling themselves back out and they kind of swing by and along a lot of these different points in these channels. The river, I mean, it's more of a river up here than it is a lake, but it's not very wide. Like the main channel here, I mean, it's not super wide, so they're kind of easy to find if you're trolling up here. You just want to keep moving a lot of water though, and you can do that by trolling crankbaits and Lindy rigs and bottom bouncers and stuff. But this is earlier into the summer / late spring, and they start to disperse over a drawn out period back to the rest of the lake. So you can kind of follow these fish down, and I would start up in this area looking to catch them in late May to early June, and kind of start working your way back down the lake here. But some key areas to target would be just these emptied out kind of flats and different curves and bends that they have. So if there's kind of a straight sheer drop that's right along here, this edge here, these fish will probably sit out here in this channel and come up onto this flat here during the evening to feed. Walleye are nocturnal, so they're evening predators. They have the big eyes. They're really good at night hunting, and you're going to catch more fish, generally speaking, on days when you have a lot of cloud cover and some wind, or you're fishing the early morning, late evening, or even all the way in through the night. But you want to definitely, when they're in early post-spawn, be fishing the flats. It's usually when the bait will get scattered out along the flats, and they're going to need a lot of energy, and they're trying to recover, and they get kind of in a feeding mode where they're actively going around and trying to find bait fish. So if you're seeing bait fish on your graphs, you're fishing flats, and you're just going to be trolling and covering water, because otherwise you'll be sitting there all day and you might only catch a couple fish every other couple days you go out. Really cover quite a bit of water, and you're fishing with bottom bouncers and crankbaits and try a lot of different variety of colors and things, just try to figure the fish out. But these kind of flats out here, very productive areas this time of year to catch these fish as they're moving back into the rest of the lake. You can kind of follow this along. Up here, there's some other coves and stuff where there's more flats just off the main channel where they're coming back off of. Like there's a channel here where it gets out to be about 30 feet, and then it starts to kind of pop back up. And there's a big shallow kind of a point area over here, and that'd be an area that I would try to hit during evening hours whenever they would come back up off of. Same kind of situation over here is a hard bend, really steep bank over here is probably a cliff. Same kind of situation on the other river arms of the lake as well for this time. You can go over here on the Niangua and you'll find similar stuff in Little Niangua, but they'll make runs up here during the spring and then disperse back out their lake. Same kind of pattern. You just got to kind of fish the general locations where you're going to find them. So there's a big shallow bluff. There's a big shallow flat over here next to this bluff, and kind of see the tighter contour lines right here along this bank, and then they just kind of fall out straight into this big shallow flat area here, and they would hit that and these big flat areas over in here. I know there's been some fish that I've caught there before. Going down here along Layard Gale, just trolling those Lindy rigs and crankbaits, along the different little points and little outcroppings and flats that you have as they're funneling their way back through. It's going to be your best bet to locate these fish and catch a few. Low light conditions and night is going to always be better no matter what time of year you're fishing for these fish. They're nocturnal feeders. They're just made for that. But once you find these fish, a lot of the good baits you guys can use to really target them include these Smithwick Rogue kind of style of jerk baits where you can kind of slow down and catch some of those more suspended fish, especially at night if they're up a little bit higher in the water column. Or you can fish some of these little swim baits. This is a Berkeley Ripple Shad. They're really kind of diverse in how you can fish them. You can kind of hop them across the bottom really aggressively or you can go ahead and just kind of fan cast them out along and catch some of the suspended fish as well if they're chasing around bait. You'll catch a lot of other fish while doing this too, especially with the jerk baits and swim baits and stuff, but if they're really in a negative mood, you know you're finding the fish, but you're not able to really catch that many of them. You can also try doing a slip bobber, setting it to the depth that the fish you're at and fishing it back over with live bait kind of slow with a night crawler or a minnow, and you can pick off a few fish doing that as well. But the main weapon for this is going to be your bottom bouncer and Lindy rig style thing. This is just a picture I found online of what one looks like. It's really, there's a lot of combinations you can do. You can do different kinds of beads, different kinds of blades. They have different styles of that. You have this big R-bend or bottom bouncer kind of stick weight, and it's going to keep your bait up off the bottom. And this line here is going to be a few feet away from where that is at, and it's going to be dragging behind. You'll put a live night crawler on here with these two hooks. You can kind of put the back end of the night crawler over here, and it's a kind of a harness for that to sit on. That thing will twirl along with the blade as you're dragging it along, and you want to troll at speeds between 0.8 miles per hour and 1.2 mile an hour, and you're going to want to try to keep your line at a 45 degree to a 30 degree angle from your rod tip down to wherever your bottom bouncer is at, and that kind of keeps it from getting snagged up. You're going to need to use about 1 ounce of weight for these different bottom bouncers and make them in all kinds. This is a 3 here in the picture, but you're going to need about 1 ounce per every 10 feet you're going to be fishing. So if you're fishing, let's say 20 feet, you're going to need a 2 ounce sinker, and you're going to need a heavier weight if you have really big blades. If you're using like Colorado style blades, you might even go to a 2.5 ounce if you need to kind of keep that bait down, because the blade will kind of stir up a lot more water, catch a lot more water, and make that kind of rise up a little bit and catch some more. So it kind of helps pull that bottom bouncer up off the bottom, and you want to maintain bottom contact as much as you can. Whenever these fish take this bait, you're almost going to kind of let them have it like as if you were fishing with a Texas rig or something, just kind of dropping your rod tip back so that they can eat it, and then you're going to make a sweeping motion upwards to set the hook on these fish. Later in the summer, as water heats up, they start to congregate more in the mid to lower sections of the lake. So one of the really good areas on the mid-lake area over here, this is near Lynn Creek, that people are able to successfully pull walleye out, especially during the summer months, as currents being generated by Bagnell Dam. Like I've talked about in a few of my other videos with the bass and crappie, fish and bait fish get scattered out here along the points whenever there's a current running through the lake, and the walleye follow that, and they kind of get set up, especially on this hump that's out here. So there's like a really steep, deep channel that's out here in the 60-foot water range, and it jumps up to 30 on the low side of this and all the way up to almost within like 15 feet of water on the high side. And you control those bottom bouncers and the crankbaits along this. You can snap jig those swim baits off the bottom here. There's a big stump field though, so you might get hung up a couple times with that. And just kind of troll in and out of this along the break lines on the cloudier days with some wind. They might set up a little bit higher on this point. Post frontal conditions, or if it's a really high bluebird sky during the day, they might be sitting out here on the deep ends of this, and they might be in these little ditches. So this is like a deeper section here. Everybody hits the high points and stuff, but a lot of times walleye even sit in little troughs and ditches off to the sides of them during the day, and then come up here on the top to feed at night. But another good section to be fishing along over here besides that is going to be this area from the toll bridge on Lake of the Ozarks, which is right here. It's this bridge here, and these points coming out that stick out, you're going to fish that all the way down over here by the island. And anywhere in here, these points kind of get to have some fish on them during the mid to late summer months. They start to kind of congregate out here, and you control those same kind of baits over the tops right where these channels kind of pop up, and there's some more points to really be hitting on. So some of these points over here will hold some fish really good, and people catch them accidentally this time of year by deep dive cranking bass and stuff off these points as well, especially in the evening hours. A lot of what makes these points special and what makes these points very good, I'm going to try to find a really good example of one, is that they just come up super fast, and they're kind of like a shelf more so than a point. So you see This is very tight contour lines. It's a straight cliff and it comes up and it's kind of a gradual slope downward. And those fish will sit over here on this deeper side of this and they'll pop up here in the evening to feed. And then same kind of situation with these areas over here, as they will sit along these channels and then pop up here even between docks and stuff. And in those situations you can't really troll as well, but you can troll on the outside edges here right along those break lines. You can pick some fish off during the day if you fish right along the edges of this. You just got to have good graphing to be able to find that. And you want to definitely be trying to locate bait as well. The active fish are going to be around bait this time of year. And you want to be fishing active fish as opposed to inactive, because you can troll right over a school of inactive fish that won't even budge for your baits. You won't even know that they're there unless you're fishing really slow. And you want to try to find the active ones that are going to want to eat. Troll over everything first. If you're not catching anything but you're seeing some fish, go back over, throw some live bait out on a slip bobber down to the depth that they're at, and then you should be able to start picking off a few fish that way. But it's a lot more of a grind in that situation when those fish are in a negative feeding mood. But it's just trial and error and being patient with everything. You're going to end up going around and you're hitting a lot of these different points, whether it be on either side of the channel here. This is another good example of a good point. It's got a pretty good flat top to it, and it comes out of like 80 feet of water over here. So areas like that are going to hold some fish. They're not just going to hold walleye, they're going to hold fish of all kinds of species, bass and crappie and white bass, catfish, everything. So you're going to catch a lot of different stuff while doing this, not just walleye. Another good point right here to probably hit, and have tried maybe deep cranking this along the sides here, and you control it as well. Just experiment with everything a little bit. Nothing's going to be a one-size-fits-all. Walleye are very finicky, and they take quite a bit of some patience to go after. If you're just getting into fishing, I wouldn't recommend trying to target walleye as your first fish to get into it, because you'll get frustrated. And this is more of a challenge to even more experienced anglers and stuff. Same time of year, I will cover this area up here real quick too, as well as midsummer, with it being good down there towards the middle lake. This area up here by Hawatonka gets good again because it's a spring and it's cold water, so the rest of the lake will get kind of hot. Those fish are eating really pretty much exclusively at night, and they're getting kind of lethargic like everything else. Their metabolism gets slowed down when it gets so hot, especially since they're walleye. They like the cooler water. They're going to be up here where it's a little bit cooled off by that spring that comes out of this. It says Trout Glen Pool over here, so where the spring comes out and feeds this whole cove, and along this bluff that's out here. It's not even really graphed by Navionics for whatever reason. It just kind of gives you just a shallow area, but I know it gets to be about 20 foot deep along this bluff over here. It's a big flat to the left of here, these docks are, and then there's a straight bluff, and it's a cliff wall over here. And you control those Lindy rigs, and it's kind of a shallower area, and it kind of helps you narrow down where the fish are going to be out with a shallower, narrower section. So earlier in the year, or if you come up here towards the river arms, it's a little bit easier to pattern them and get a feel for how this is done, just because you have less water to cover and it's not as open. Thank you guys for watching this video so much. Subscribe to the channel if you've not yet. Drop a thumbs up down below if you like this, and comment down below what you'd like to see next. If you want to see me go out and catch some fish on Lake of the Ozarks like this, or if you want to see some more breakdowns on Lake of the Ozarks or another lake with some different species, comment down below. Let me know what you guys are thinking. Thank you so much, and have a good day.